Good afternoon, comrades. It is Commissar Der Nikolai Bonjornowski contacting you from his man cave on Main Street. That's not really a man cave. It's just, it's what it is. What it is. It's a base of operations. It's not Martha Stewart. It's not. Lifestyles of the rich and famous. It's a place for my stuff, as George Carlin used to say, a place for my stuff. And it's Friday, and I need to knock this out of the ballpark like quick, like a bunny, due to other engagements. But the good news, just on a personal note, and I'm alright, like just being transparent about my life and what I got going on and blah blah blah. But my seasonal job as a park ranger ends tonight, which frees me up. It's like something I do on the side during the summer, and I like it, and it's cool. It gives me more of a sense of authority, being like Yogi Bear, like in the town of Union. But that ends tonight, so that frees me up. That frees up like 20 hours of my time every week, so that it's like I have more time and resources to dedicate to the classes and other things that I've got going on that are cool, that I should tell you more about in time. Want to finish up on books today. Want to finish up using a just kind of doing a collation of what Hansen has to say and what Stanley Barron has to say. Because there's a lot we didn't cover in the lecture on Tuesday. Bullet points. Media scans starting this week. Okay, 2 people. I've already seen that their media scans are up. Fantastic. But now the onus, it's not really an onus, it's more just, like a thing, is on the rest of y'all to comment on those. Both of them are good. I've looked at one, I haven't looked at the other yet. So, whatever. Make sure to comment on those by the time that we meet next Tuesday, the 27th. Check and make sure you know when you're on the schedule. Remember, 2 people a week. Check your media scan schedule. Make sure you're on there. And on top of that, what I did on the blog, and I sent you guys out an email, I put up a few media scans of my own that I had to do for classes in the past that you can look at. I'm not an egomaniac about it. You can look at them as for examples. You can comment on them for extra credit. Some of you could avail yourself of extra credit. Everyone can, really. It's always good to, do extra credit. So that's going to be, that's up and running. All right. If you have any questions about what to do for a media scan, and my examples are not good enough for you, the ones I'm seeing right now, it's like the people that were up this week totally get it. And you'll see them. So there's that. Other things. Quiz on Tuesday. All right. Please don't run. Don't go and hide. Just show up. Make sure to go to the Hansen website and look over those. It's like studying for that quiz is going to take you 45 minutes to an hour. No more, no less. All right. You answer the questions. There's a guide to check them at the end, and you memorize them. And then what you're going to get on Tuesday is you're going to get, like 12 questions or 15 questions, and you're just going to like send me back the answers via email, and then we'll be done until the next quiz. All right. So first 3 chapters. All right. Remember, we're into chapter 4 now. You should be reading chapter 6 on newspapers and newspaper publishing for next week, because by next Tuesday we'll definitely be in the newspapers. And there's going to be a mini assignment on newspapers, too. So I'll be reading chapter 6. You should have chapter 4 in the bag today for this lecture. Guest speakers coming up after the Thanksgiving break. we should be okay. We should be okay, and I hope that you guys are okay. All right? Let's get into books. We are talking about the earliest books, the earliest publishing, specifically in the United States, but elsewhere too. And we talked about how a lot of the earliest material was, limited to like things like runs of like 10,000, like Ben Franklin's Poor Richard's Almanac, 10,000 copies, which was a big thing back then. Nowadays, 10,000 copies is kind of still a big thing if you're a small public. I mean, if you self-publish and you sell 10,000 copies, it's like a real thing, but not nearly the kind of numbers that we see with bestsellers, from the past and the present, and we need to talk about this kind of up and down of the publishing industry, and the fact that somebody had brought it, one of our guest speakers that is going to be coming up, sent me some really interesting articles about how book reading is on the rise right now due to the pandemic. People are reading just a little more, kind of the percentages are going up due to the pandemic. People are looking to figure out what to do with themselves, so they're reading a lot more. And I guess it's reflected in the numbers of sales, which is always a good thing. It's like literacy is always important. So we talked about how the content of some of the early publishing was primarily of a religious nature or about agriculture, like very practical things, or about politics, about things that were going on either on a local level or a colonial level or a regional level. But while all this is going on, remember, we're headed towards a war. We're headed towards a war for our independence, and that war will be made, the demands that that war calls for will be explicated in books, all right? Specifically, a couple of really famous books that come out at this point. A man by the name of Thomas Paine will put out a book called Common Sense, addressed to the inhabitants of America on the following interesting subjects, all right? And it will galvanize people around the idea of independence, all right? He'll speak about, needs and things that need to be redressed, and he'll and it will become like a rallying cry for the 13 colonies to organize and revolt, all right? It sold 120,000 copies to a total population of 400,000 adults. So this is a major change. This is a huge swath of the population, all on the same page, reading the same book, addressing the same ideas, all right? That's 400,000 people, Then comes the Revolutionary War. Then comes the period after the war, where we've gained our independence, we've gained our freedom, and publishing will, kind of goes without saying, will flourish in this age of this newfound freedom due to the fact that we're not under this yoke of censorship from England anymore. So that publishing grows really, really quick. And but books still remain expensive, all right? Relatively expensive still, all right? Because of the cost of publication, the amount of materials that go into it, the amount of labor. I don't want to get into economics, here, but it just becomes a question that they're still costly to make. They're very time intensive and whatnot. However, the push for compulsory education swells. All right. swells the numbers. All right, the push for compulsory education. This country, at that point, will be very concerned as an initiative of getting people educated. You know, we have this newfound idea of democracy, of citizen representation, of civic literacy, of civic engagement, and part and parcel of that overarching project of a democratic republic was the idea of people being educated. You know, everyone being on board and being educated. All right, and this whole idea of public education. You know, and going to school for free. You know, going to at least public school for free. You know, which will become an institution that we had not really seen in Western Europe up to that point. You know, education is always more for the elites until this idea of this kind of democratic education and going to school for free and everybody getting educated and everybody getting on the same page. You know, by 1861, America, and this is right before the Civil War, America has the highest literacy rate in the world, 58%. 58% of everybody living in the country at that time could read and write. All right, those are astonishing numbers for this time. Okay, we need to keep it in mind. We need to keep in mind the literacy rates. we need to keep in mind the idea of like what literacy rates tend to still be in, for instance, the developing world, where there's still problems with literacy. All right, and you know, and dare I say, you know, we're back into a situation in this country where literacy is becoming an issue again. All right, due to a lot of conflicting social, economic, and political factors, it's like more and more kids are like just kind of like, you know, zoning out and not picking up the skills. You know, but that's another conversation. The forces involved in generating that are a conversation for another day. You know, why aren't kids reading? Why aren't kids learning to read? We'll skim the surface today, but that's a very, very complicated subject. You know, by 1900, by the turn of the 20th century, 9 out of 10 U.S. citizens will be able to read. This is astonishing. You know, that by 120 years ago, 9 out of 10 people could read. The technology of printing will improve to the point, and this will be due to a new form of technology that will spring up called linotype. Linotype basically is an offset lithography, all right? If you want to do some more research on linotyping and lithography, you know, just wiki it. But it was a different process that made things faster and used a different type of technology, a linotype, and books became less expensive. All right, the price starts to drop, so now people can afford books. More and more people can afford them, you know. So there's that. All right. By the 1800s, we're seeing a kind of flowering of this idea. More and more people, novelists, are exploring the idea of what this medium can be as an art form, and as a form of bringing people ideas and concepts and worlds, you know, exploring this medium in ways that had not been done. Well, at least it had not been done to any great extent up to this period. You know, do we have novels and poems, you know, all throughout, you know, from the Renaissance on? Yes. But now it's just kind of like, you know, the spigot has opened And now it's like you're getting all these novels, all right? And Americans are writing, you know? And some of the greatest novels, some of the greatest literature of this period of the 19th century come from America. You know, when you look at, you know, when you look at list of like the great world literature of the 19th century, it's like invariably we kind of like are well represented up to the point where it's like a majority of the great novels are being written in this country. 1850, The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne, who will go on to write other great novels. This novel will be made into films that you can Google and watch on Netflix or Amazon, but you can actually go and read it too. I know it's like a hard sell, but you know people actually read the Scarlet. It's like 1851, Moby Dick by Herman Melville. This great and intricate. Melville is a really interesting cat, and he will write this book about whale hunting. And this whaler, this obsessed whaler, looking for this killer, this white whale, this legendary white whale. And the book is really about a lot of different things, but it's primarily about obsession, you know, and going at something at all costs. And Moby Dick will ultimately be the inspiration for all kinds of popular culture, including a film that would come out in 1976 or 1977 called Jaws. Moby Dick will be the inspiration for this Steven Spielberg film called Jaws, which will turn into it will start this phenomenon. More people will go and see this film than any other film ever before that, all right? Jaws becomes the first of what will become the genre of blockbusters, all right? There's no the term blockbuster film is not invented until this film Jaws, which is inspired by Moby Dick, for all intents and purposes, all right? It's this retelling of that tale, you know? I'll just tell you like a little anecdote about that. I was about like 11, 12 years old, and I was down in I think it was Daytona, Florida. I was a kid. I was like on vacation, and this movie came out about this killer shark, and the beaches where it was weird. Like the beaches, like everybody was seeing this film, so there was kind of this like paranoid, like people would be yelling shark, and you know, because this movie was just so intense, you know, I can remember like standing in line for this film. Somehow I got my cousin to like go and let me go and see it. The lines would go around the block. For this film, and I can remember being in a line in Daytona, Florida, and these guys coming by in a convertible. They must have been drinking, but they're yelling at the crowd like they're giving away. They're doing a spoiler. They're like yelling at the guy, people in line, like the shark blows up, and everybody's going, "Oh my god!" You just spoil it for everybody. Just a little anecdote, you know. So, you know, all of these spin-offs from this. So there's all these books coming out during this time, and you know, a lot of the lists that, you know, we were going over a list the other day in class of like these great books that you should read. A lot of the lists of like the greatest 100 books of all time consists of books that come out during this period of the 1800s, you know, but not all of it will be of this like high-minded, you know, great works of literature, masterpiece theater shit. You know, there will be a lot of what will come out of this whole period too will be this thing called the penny press and paperback, and we'll talk about that more. The penny press is more of newspapers. We're talking books, but what you'll start having is this whole thing called pulp literature or pulp fiction, which is called pulp fiction primarily due to the material used to make the paper of those books. All right, they'll find cheaper ways of using wood pulp for paper that is a lot cheaper. It's a lot coarser. If you have any, like, I'll give you an example. If you have any like old paperbacks around, you'll see this phenomena of pages that start to age and turn yellow, and that's due to the paper quality, and this isn't actually like pulp paper, but it's kind of close. But pulp paper will literally be like almost like turn a kind of dark yellow, after about 5 or 10 years. All right, but what will come out of that what will come out of that cheaper process will be a lot of novels and tales, just for like Joe Sixpack of the time, what the equivalent of Joe Sixpack. He's done working the farm. He's done plowing all the fields. He doesn't want to sit and like worry his little head about all these metaphorical implications of like Herman Melville, or all the moral, ethical implications of the Scarlet Letter. He wants to just read. He wants to be entertained. He wants to read a good novel about what some adventure, explorers, settlers, cowboys and Indians. We need to talk about that, and these novels, and a lot of it will be like, and this pulp fiction will continue throughout the 20th century. And not all of it, and it's not a question of it all being like of a B level variety. A lot of like pulp writers will become famous because they'll be writing, for the pulp genre, but their books will just be so damn good that they'll become classics. So we should not make this distinction between high and low culture when it comes to the pulps. But a lot of it, was kind of silly, and just like quick reads or quick. It's like it's kind of like watching Two Broke Girls. It would have been like the literary equivalent of like, watching Two Broke Girls or whatever, Three Men and a Baby, whatever it is. So there's that. I don't know why this is here. Don't know why. Herman Melville, Mark Twain. Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn will come out at this time. Famous novel that will be turned into multiple film versions. I can remember watching the Disney version when I was like 8 years old, of like Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer, and I can remember reading them too as a kid in elementary school, and it was what you did. It's like if you had any kind of interest in this kind of stuff, and Mark Twain would become one of our premier journalists. It would become one of our premier novelists. And something about Mark Twain that some of you might know is that one of the most famous novelists and writers of American history is buried. For most of you, it's a half hour or 45 minutes away. He's buried in Elmira, New York, where he spent his last days. Mark Twain. There's also, whose real name was Samuel Clemens. Hence, the center up there for the arts is called the Clemens Center, named after him, up in Elmira. And they put on a lot, well, at least before the pandemic, they put on a lot of great stuff, including there was a great actor by the name of Hal Holbrook. It's like I'm caught in this, like, I don't know if he's still alive or not. Hal Holbrook was this great 70s actor who did this traveling show, who played Mark Twain, like the wit and wisdom of Mark Twain on Broadway. And he just played him he played him so good that he became synonymous with the role. If you ever get an opportunity to like go on YouTube or whatever and find any videos of the actor Hal Holbrook playing Mark Twain, he's definitely worth checking out. The wit and wisdom of he was considered like a humorist, which at the time he was the closest thing that you had at that time to like a stand-up comedian. Like a lot of his stuff was funny, and we can't forget, like there was comedy, there was this genre of comedy and humor and humorist, and that would be embedded in things like political cartoons and satire and all that stuff, So there's that. By around 1860, a company called Beadle and Company will begin the publication of dime novels. All right, now it's so cheap you can get them for a dime. All right, which was cheap at the time. Pulp novels. We've been through this. This is another term for pulp novels. So they're mostly frontier and adventure stories. I know I'm repeating myself. 4 million volumes now, published in 5 years. All right, 4 million volumes. All right, 1860. 4 million people like reading. All right, it's like okay, it's like so they're not reading Chaucer, they're not reading Boccaccio, they're not reading the great works of literature, but people are reading. People are reading for fun and entertainment. 4 million volumes published within 5 years. 1939, he kind of jumps ahead here. Robert de Graaf introduces paperback books in America through a company called Pocketbooks. His pocketbooks were small, they were inexpensive. They were about a quarter. They were reissues of books that had already become successful as hardcovers. Now we have this like whole transition to this business model where you put the book out in hardcover first, which is still a business model. You put the book out in hardcover first, and you make your money, you make your revenue. Gotta make the money, and afterwards, after it's kind of like the hardcover has kind of done its run, you put out the paperback, and you get back, and you get more of a revenue stream. The people that weren't willing to, it just makes total sense as a business model. The people that weren't willing to read it, the diehard fans who weren't willing to pick it up as a hardcover and shell out the cash, now that second tier like picks it up for a cheaper price, and you get more readers, and you get more revenue. They were sold just about everywhere. Newsstands, bookstores, train stations, shipping terminals, and drug and department stores. It will become it's like paperback books will become a very big staple in your drugstores, your pharmacies, and your department stores at that time. It's like I can remember, not to keep on hammering anecdotes at you. I can remember going to like the Grand Way in Endicott, and they would have this huge section for books, like this kind of mini Barnes and Noble, because people were reading. It's like there wasn't the internet, there wasn't all this cable television, there wasn't like it's like more people were reading back in the 70s, and I would go, and my mother would be shopping, and I'd be looking through books. I was like a nerdy kid, basically. I would be looking through the sci-fi stuff, and I was always like enthralled by the covers. The covers were always great. They're always super, super imaginative. And so they were being sold everywhere. Within 8 weeks of their introduction, de Graaf sold 325,000 books. Soon new and existing publishers joined the paperback boom. Of course there's competition, right? It's like other publishers say, hey, it's like I want to get in on that gravy train. And you got Fawcett Publications. Then there's this move by a company called Fawcett to start something new. It's like, all right, why not just skip the hardcover and just run like original books as paperbacks, and that will become a thing. All right, like you can just get the first run as a paperback. You know, just kind of like jumping on the competition. Fawcett, they start, and that happens in the 50s. Traditionalists have some concerns about the cheapening of the book. All right, this whole idea of this kind of dumbing down of the culture due to this mass production, which will be an aesthetic and ethical struggle every time there's a new mass media, right? This whole idea of the lowest common denominator, all right, and putting out, you know, what like the high-minded intelligentsia would consider to be like junk, you know. And this will be, you know, and this struggle will occur across every, you know, form of mass media invention, you know. So they've got some concerns about the cheapening of the book, but that was more than offset by the popularity of paperbacks and the willingness of publishers to take chances. People, because it's not like you don't have the same level of investment of putting out a paperback with really interesting ideas and really challenging or innovative or even controversial. You don't have the same level of investment there. It's like that you do with a film or that you do with a television series where you've got like all this money invested, you know, so that it's more of a medium that allowed publishers to take chances. So that there's all these kind of controversial novels that are coming out because they can do it. They can take the chance because, you know, it's not a big. There's not that much skin in the game economically, you know, to like put out something and be like, let's see if people buy it, something experimental, you know. So there's this like kind of renaissance that goes on of these great novels starting around the 50s and 60s, all right? So we got through that. So within weeks, they're getting orders of like 15,000 a day. All right, so boom, this thing is like, you know, by the early 20th century, people are reading. There's a lot of reading going on, you know, and by the 50s and 60s, we see this phenomena of the controversial novel. The controversial novels by like African American authors, and books like Catcher in the Rye, books by Ralph Ellison, Richard Wright. Paperbacks books become the norm, and they surpass hardcover book sales for the first time in 1960. I don't know if I have that in the PowerPoint, but there's books out there being published that are just like causing like a stir, you know, like buzz, you know, like these buzz books, you know, and of course, you know what happens, you know, when a book pushes the boundaries, when a book pushes the boundaries of the norms, the cultural norms, and the social mores. Well, folks, we know what happens. You know, the Harper Valley PTA, some lady on the Harper Valley PTA gets a hold of one of these little ditties and hazards to crack it open and read it. And, you know, she's a good church-going woman. Nothing against church, but she finds a few words in there or a few ideas that, you know, kind of raise the hackles on the back of her neck. And the next thing you know, she's like marching out of town hall, you know, with her other, you know, Karens, with the other Karens, you know, with their flowered hats, their Aunt Minnie hats, you know, and they're saying this thing's got to be stopped, you know, and the tug of war that goes on between, you know, conservative, you know, Bible Belt, you know, middle America values, and, you know, this clash of like cultures, you know, that makes for a democracy. You know, and there'll be a lot of ugly times during this period too, where books will, and it's still going on. We'll talk about it. Books are still getting banned. There's always a freaking Karen out there with too much freaking time on her hands, worried about her kid reading Harry Potter or her kid reading Catcher in the Rye you know, and having to march down to the school board meeting and have her 5 cents. And the next thing you know, in some places of this country, you know, certain quizlings, certain yes men, so and so was like saying this, but it's like, and they'll like, and it still happens. It's an ugly practice, but it still happens. And it's usually like pushed with people with just too much time on their hands, you know. Should go and like do something, like pick up, you know, go work at an animal shelter. You know, if you got enough time to like lead like a book burning campaign, that time could probably be like far better spent at like a soup kitchen or a dog shelter or just doing something, you know, that's not trying to destroy the human spirit. You know, your time can, it's a time issue. You know, you need a pet project. You know, books are the least mass of our mass media. Why? We'll talk about that. Why are they the least mass of our mass media? One of the reasons is because I don't know how I like that. Two Towers token. Why is it the least mass media? Because when I open a book and I sit and read on a sunny afternoon, it's a private affair. You know, I'm not going to a theater. You know, I'm not on YouTube and watching it with like 10,000 other people that I may or may not know. It's me and the book. You know, and if I have to get up and I want to go buy a soda, I want to go to the bathroom, I can stop the story right then and there. You know, I can stop it, I can pick it back up, I can go back and read. So that it's very much a kind of, and what Barron will say at least is that books are the least massive of our mass media and audience reach and in the magnitude of industry itself. And this fact shapes the nature of the relationship between medium and audience. Publishing houses, both large and small, produce narrowly or broadly aimed titles for readers who buy and carry away individual units. This more direct relationship between publishers and readers renders books fundamentally different from other mass media. For example, because books are less dependent than other mass media on attracting the largest possible audience. I lost my place here. Books are more able and more likely to incubate new, challenging, or unpopular ideas. As the medium least dependent on advertiser support, books can be aimed at extremely small groups of readers. You can have these niches, which were always there, you know, throughout like the 20th century, of people that would just, you know, you had like sci-fi fans that were reading sci-fi, and they were like this kind of minority, you know, or like people that like romance novels, you know, and so you had all these niches, you know, so as a medium least dependent on advertiser support, books can aim at extremely small groups of readers, challenging them and their imaginations in ways that many sponsors would find unacceptable in advertising-based media. Because books are produced and sold as individual units as opposed to a single television program simultaneously distributed to millions of viewers, or a single edition of a mass circulation newspaper, more voices can enter and survive in the industry. This medium can sustain more voices in the cultural form than can other traditional mass media. As former head of the New York Public Library, Vartan Gregorian explained to journalist Bill Moyers, when among books, he said, I think I got this as a thing. Do I have this as a... No, I thought I did. I thought I had it as a PowerPoint. He says, Gregorian, head of the New York Public Library, he says, suddenly you feel humble. The whole world of humanity is in front of you. Here is the human endeavor, human aspiration, human agony, human ecstasy, human bravura, human failures all before you. You know, all these, you walk into a library and you think about what's in all these books. All these struggles, hopes, dreams, all these stories, you know, everything from like intergalactic battles to battles for civil rights, you know, biographies, autobiographies, books about science, nature, art, engineering, you know, it just boggles the mind. The brilliance of like of what a library really represents, and how we have gotten to a point in our culture where we almost dismiss it as being a thing, you know. And it's like, I don't want to like toot my own horn, but I think that one of the greatest joys of my life, you know, was getting a library card. And I used to have this uncle who was a retired postman, and he used to spend a lot of time down at the public library, and he would come and pick me up, and we would go, and he would read all the papers there every day. He'd read the different journals, and I would be like just crawling around in the books, getting science fiction. I was like just this, I loved science fiction, like Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein, and I would get my books, and I would like, and they were free, and you got to take them home, and you got to read them, you know, in this world that opens up to you, you know, through this avenue. You know, didn't have the internet, you know, video games were not even a thing yet, you know, there was none of that, but there was this world of universes crying out to be read, you know, and what a joy, what a true joy such a thing is, you know. And I think about things like what's going on now, you know, and I think about when I teach in the public schools, you know, and I see what goes on, and I think about those days, you know, and I mean, it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. The kids don't see it, you know, they don't see it, and they don't appreciate it because no one really tells them. Nobody really tells them. No one sells them on the idea of this being like just like one of the best things in the world to do, you know. So there's that experience. Barron talks about the cultural value of books, all right? Why are books valuable as a cultural thing? Not just as a mass media, but as part of our cultural heritage. And we need to be able to make this distinction between culture and media, right? You know, what is our culture? What is, you know, we talked about this early on, our culture as opposed to like media. Media usually is you know, predicated on revenue. You know, culture is something that we share. You know, sometimes are media and culture often synonymous? Yes, they are. You know, but not all the time. The book industry is bound by many of the same financial and industrial pressures that constrains other media. But books, more than the others, are in a position to transcend those restraints. You know, in Fahrenheit 451, Montauk's boss, Captain Beatty, explains why all books must be burned. And Captain Beatty says to Montauk, once, books appeal to a few people here and there everywhere. They could afford to be different. The world was roomy, but then the world got full of eyes and elbows and mouths. Eyes and elbows and mouths. What does he mean? You know, think about it. Bradbury's Firemen of the Future destroys books precisely because they are different. It is their difference from other mass media that makes books unique in our culture. All right. What's so great about books? Number one, books. I'm just going in here. I might have to do this in two parts, my friends. What's so great about books? Books are agents of social and cultural change. We talked about these books that came out before the Revolutionary War. Thomas Paine's Common Sense, starts a revolution. Certain books, certain ideas will change people's minds about stuff. Civil rights movement in the 60s. Even before that, the abolitionist movement comes out, due to this are books the sole cause of social and cultural and political revolutions? No. But do they act as capacitors? Do they act as transistors? Do they act as a way of pushing something that's already in the air? Pushing something that's already kind of and giving it a name, right? And everybody, for instance, in the 19th century reading something like Uncle Tom's Cabin and saying, you know what? She's right, or somebody, or, later on, reading books like Ralph Ellison's The Invisible Man and going, you know what? He's right. Or reading the autobiography of Malcolm X and saying, you know what? He's right, because it's in the air. And some people come out and they have the courage to give it a voice. So books are an agent of social, cultural change. Free of the need to generate mass circulation for advertisers. Offbeat, controversial, even revolutionary ideas can reach the public, both on the right and the left. Because what Barron will talk about will be this book by Andrew MacDonald called The Turner Diaries, which was ideological and how-to guide for the anti-government militia movement. All right. So this controversy runs the gamut, from right to left, of people putting out books and having their say, and sometimes the ideas aren't popular, and they might not be popular for the left or the right, but this is a thing, right? Number 2, books are an important cultural repository. What's a repository? Place where you keep stuff, right? Place where you keep stuff. Want to definitively win an argument? Look it up. We often turn to books for certainty and truth about the world in which we live and the ones about which we want to know. Which countries border Chile? Find the atlas. James Brown sax player. Look at Bob Gula's Icons of R&B and Soul. Books have been edited and fact-checked. Unlike much of what you might find online, they are edited and they are fact-checked, right? So, you can pick up a book. There's a better chance of picking up a book, say, on something like the Vietnam War and opposing viewpoints, and there is a far more greater possibility that what is in here is real than what somebody tweeted, right? Because there was this idea of fact checking and integrity when it came to that. If you want the real deal, I always say, and it's I cannot say this too strongly or too much. If I could get up on top of my house and yell it, I would. If you want the real deal, go to books. All right, not television, not the internet. Go to books. All right, go to reputable publishers because they'll give you context. They're not some books written while some I guess Cuomo just put out a book about the COVID about the pandemic. While it's still going on, it's it's like I was telling a friend of mine. I was the last thing you want to do, it's kind of like writing a book about how much you're winning at the casino while you're still there playing. It's kind of like that. You don't really want to write a book about how much you won how much you're winning at the casino when you haven't left yet. You gotta watch those you gotta watch those books that come out while something is still going on. Be very, very suspicious. All right. Books are our windows into the past. Our windows into the past. Think about it. You know, when I read Tom Sawyer, when I read Herman Melville, when I read Dante, when I read Plato, I am hearing the voice. When I read something like Plato or Aristotle, I am hearing a voice of somebody who has been dead and gone for 2,500 years. It's like traveling in time. It's like traveling in time. It's not just the traveling in time of the imagination, you know, and I'm not saying that films don't do this, all right, but films do it in a different way. You know, when I read a book by Herman Melville or Edgar Allan Poe or Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, I'm reading something that the guy's been gone for 150 years. And he's opening a window into a world that he or she lived in and reporting it to me. Folks, it's like traveling in time. It's like traveling in time. What was the United States like in the 19th century? Read Alex de Tocqueville's Democracy in America. England in the early 1800s. Read Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. It's not always nonfiction that is the best representation of what happened. Sometimes, you know, really, really good fiction by writers like Jane Austen or writers like Thomas Mann or Honore de Balzac or de Maupassant or Edgar Allan Poe, you know, or Jules Verne, you know, gives us a closer picture of what life was like for them than maybe even nonfiction, you know. Because they're writing at a time and they're reporting on what they see. It's all in the details. Books, windows in the past. Books are important sources for personal development. How do we learn things about, you know, how to be, you know, there was this hugely popular book, and I don't want to like push it too hard because it was kind of like bullshit. Back in the day, by a guy named Dale Carnegie, this famous businessman. He wrote this book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it became this kind of self-help manual for the business managerial class, you know, how to present yourself. But, you know, it's not just that. Self-help is like, think about all the you go to Barnes and Noble. The ones that are still open. You know, you go to Barnes and Noble and you have this huge section of like self-help. You know, from everything to like how to go on a diet, you know, to how to overcome substance abuse, to how to meditate, you know, to how to do yoga, how to lift weights, you know, how to get control over your codependence, you know, how to let go of like destructive tendencies, whatever it is, right? Self-help. You know, personal improvement. But books also speak to us more individually than advertiser-supported media because they're focused on target markets. For example, Our Bodies Ourselves was this famous book, Our Bodies Ourselves, introduced by the Boston Women's Health Book Collective in the very earliest days of the modern feminist movement. It's still published today. All right? And it was about it was like a feminist book that was about female hygiene and taking care of their bodies, you know. Dr. Spock's, not Mr. Spock from Star Trek, Dr. Spock was this famous, I can't remember what his first name was, but he was this famous pediatrician that put out these books on baby and child care that sold I saw these books like everywhere. You'd go to people's houses, they were like everywhere. You know, and it's like, you know, because it's like, you know, you had a newborn, you know, you may or may not, your mom and your aunts might be there to show you how to do things. What if they weren't? You know, where are you going to go? You know, to figure out how to raise this little creature that you just gave birth to. You know, it's like Dr. Spock was there. He was like, you do, you know, it's like he cared. You know, so there's that. Personal development. Books are wonderful sources of entertainment. Let's not forget, I ended the lecture on Tuesday on the idea that it doesn't just have to be this drag of getting information. You know, it can be about just frolicking around in this world where whether you're reading Game of Thrones or Twilight or Harry Potter or, you know, it's like this guy who I would highly recommend for escapist entertainment is escapism, and it begs the question of whether escapism is always a bad thing. And Bongiorno is going to like go on the record as saying no. Escapism is part of life. To get away from it all from time to time, especially in times like this, my friends, and especially like times like this, to have somebody like J.R.R. Tolkien transport us to another magical beauty, and it can inspire us. You know, it can inspire us too. You know, like a good friend of mine once said, Dr. Stefan Heller. He said about escapism. He said, you know who the biggest proponents of anti-escape, the biggest proponents against escapism are? He said to me one time. I was like, who? He said, jailers and wardens. Jailers and wardens aren't into escapism. Get it? So there's that. You know, books are a wonderful source of entertainment. The purchasing and reading of books is... Okay, let's get to the next one. The purchasing and reading of a book is a much more individual, personal activity than consuming advertising-supported television, radio, newspaper, and magazines, right? Or heavily promoted popular music and media. It's me and the book. It's me and the book. You know, it's me and this relationship to this object and the person that put it out and wrote this stuff and spent the time and the care to write about something. Then, you know, going and happen to, like, you know, be with the masses, like everybody watching Adam Sandler, everybody watching, you know, it's like, you know, sitting in the Cineplex, watching the same shit over and over again, you know, because in a way a lot of it is, right? As such, books tend to encourage personal reflection, right? I'm reading, I'm thinking about stuff. I put the book down. I have a moment. I'm like, wow, I never thought of it that way. You know, this idea of like, this interior landscape, you know, that it's like you become a human being. You become a human being due to this activity. We are part of a tribe, as media theorist Marshall McLuhan would say, when we consume other media, but we are alone when we read a book. Books allow you to fully explore a topic and immerse yourself in a deeper way than most media today. All right. Number 7, books are mirrors of culture. That goes without saying. Books, along with other mass media, reflect the culture that produces and consumes them. We understand more about our culture. You know, even when we read a book that we don't necessarily like, you know, it becomes, you know, sometimes I'll watch a show or I'll watch a news program or I'll watch a certain pundit that I can't freaking stand. You know, why? Because I want to understand the enemy. Well, not the enemy, but I want to understand different points of views. You know, I want to understand why this guy thinks the way he does. You know, or I'll watch something and I won't like it, but it's like I won't just stop at, I hate this. I'll try to understand, like, what the appeal is to that thing for other people. It's like, why is this thing, you know, why are people into this, you know? And I won't just stop at, like, as a media teacher, I won't just stop at, I hate this, you know, even though sometimes I might. But, you know, you get to, like, why is this bad? You know, since there are no laws that can protect. Okay, so here's another one: censorship. Gotta get into censorship. All right, and we've already talked about it a little bit. Guy by the name of Joseph Brodsky said, I'm trying to find it here. Where does he say it, Bongiorno? Where does he say it? Oh, this will come when we talk about illiteracy and self-censorship. Because this is a big thing. You know, we need to talk about illiteracy. We need to talk about this whole movement in American culture that makes reading not a good thing, all right? This whole move to, like, self-censor ourselves. There were more than enough forces out there promoting reading and literacy. But having said that, there are also forces out there that try to sell people on the idea that being an intellectual or being well-read or being scholarly is a bad thing. And there are forces out there, dare I say, out in the hinterland, usually speaking in tongues or laying their hands on it or what. It's like, you know who I'm talking about. You know, in the breadbasket, you know, or up on the hill. There's a whole bunch of people up there that think us eggheads or us academics are the source of all evil. You know, and that in itself is kind of got its issues. You know, where that comes from. You know, anti-intellectualism. You know, and I don't have time to really go at it. They usually come at us. We don't usually go at them. Well, we do go at them, but they usually come banging on the castle with their pitchforks and torches at one time or another and decide they're going to burn us at the stake. You know, and it happens every 100 years or so. You know, and it's like, once again, you know, we have this horde that comes up, you know, and it's just like, you know, those eggheads, man, those highfalutin eggheads with their degrees and all their reading and all their research, we gotta do something to shut them up, you know, because we don't like what they gotta say. Because A, we don't understand it. It ain't plain speak like we know, you know, and B, it's like, we're threatened by it, you know, and why are we threatened by it? Because deep in our heart of hearts, we're scared it might be the truth. We're scared it might be the truth, you know, and we need to shut them up, you know, and that's what they do. But more important than that, censors ban and burn books because books are repositories of ideas that can be read and considered with limited outside influence. Don't want any of those ideas floating around, folks. You know, don't want those ideas floating around. Those varmints, you know, that they're kind of like pests. You know, call in the pest control guys. You know, it's like censorship is like the pest control guys for ideas. You know, but what kind of culture develops when, by our own refusal to read books, we figuratively save the censors the trouble of striking the match? Our refusal to read books, where did it come from? You know, how does it develop? Because it happens to everybody. It happens to everybody. You know, because I can remember being this kid and loving to read. You know, and loving to read and reading what I wanted to read, and then going into this place and sitting in these rooms in this desk, you know, with this teacher that was mean and abusive more often than not. You know, they get, you know, that's why they hire them, and they would assign books. They would go as far as assigning books that I actually had wanted to read. As soon as it got assigned to me, all of a sudden, it was like root canal surgery. You know, that this book that I wanted to read got magically transformed into something I didn't want to do. You know, and that's a cultural thing. But what kind of culture develops when, by our own refusal to read books, we figuratively save the censors the trouble of striking the match? We have illiteracy at this point. Illiteracy. wherein people possess the ability to read but are unwilling to do so, amounts to doing the censor's work for them. Russian immigrant Joseph Brodsky will say, since there are no laws that can protect us from ourselves, no criminal code is capable of preventing a true crime against literature. All right? Though we can condemn the material suppression of literature, everybody's against book burning. Most people, most sensible, worldly people are like, book burning is a terrible thing. You shouldn't do it. Right? However, the burning of books, the persecution of writers, acts of censorship, the burning of books, we are powerless when it comes to its worst violation, that of not reading the books. Right? What's he saying? That we do it ourselves by not reading. We do the work for them by not reading, by refusing to read. And we'll talk about the stats of like how literacy like drops off at a certain point, you know, and keeps getting worse and worse. For that crime, a person pays with his whole life. For not reading, Brodsky says, you pay with your life in the sense that, you don't have that experience of going into that world, that is so valuable and brilliant. If the offender is a nation, it pays with its history. If the offender is a nation, it pays with its history. Right? Makes sense. Let's talk about these numbers. They're only, and these are reported from the Barron book, not the Hansen book, but, these are numbers we can all, get on the same page about, not to make a pun with it. Only 30% of 13-year-olds read almost every day. That's 1 out of 3. 13-year-olds read every day. Not a good stat. 15 to 25-year-olds spend only 7 to 10 minutes a day reading anything at all. But let me make sure I got this right, this stat right, because Bonjour screwed it up here. Where'd you find it? Can't find it. But that stat is not right. I think 2.5 hours a day watching television, that might be true. Almost half of Americans between 18 and 24. Almost half of Americans between 18 and 24, you guys, right, never read a book for pleasure, right? Unless it's assigned, what is it saying? Unless it's assigned, half of you ain't reading. Half of you don't want to read. God knows what you're doing. I kind of know what you're doing, but 40% of first-year college students and 35% of seniors read nothing at all for pleasure. Let's repeat that stat, my friends. 40% of first-year college students and 35% of you seniors read nothing at all for pleasure, while another 26% and 28% of seniors, that's seniors in college, read for pleasure less than 1 hour a week. All right, so that's 1 out of 4 might read for pleasure 1 hour a week. Dana Joya, I'm sorry about this picture, you guys. I had to. We're doing a better job of teaching kids. She says, the National Endowment for the Arts chairman at the time, Dana Joya says, we are doing a better job of teaching kids to read in elementary school, but once they enter adolescence, they fall victim to a general culture which does not encourage or reinforce reading. Because these people then read less, they read less well. Because they read less well, they do more poorly in school, they do more poorly in the job market, because they read less well. Because they read less well, they do more poorly in school, and in the job market, and in civic life, right? The trifecta. She says the habit of regular reading awakens something inside a person that makes him or her take their own lives more seriously. Reading leads to somebody what's that about? Reading leads to somebody taking their own life seriously. You know, you're not a joke. You know, you're not a sheep. You're not a number. You're a human being. You know, and your life should be a drama. With as good as with all the ups and downs of the greatest heroes, you know? And reading gives you this incentive to live that life out to the greatest extent. You start taking things seriously. Things like integrity, you know, things like a vocation, things like things like rights, things like battling against evil, you know? It's not just for Batman. Battling against evil is not just for Batman. It's for you, too. It's for you and me. We can be Batman. We can be Batman. And I want to end with this thing. Okay. Had to take a short break there. Had a doctor's appointment. But I wanted to make sure that we wrapped up books in this lecture so that we could move on Tuesday, and I had a few PowerPoint slides that I still wanted to cover. So a very, very interesting science fiction writer, and he was one of the most prolific writers of the 20th century. His name was Isaac Asimov, and he was a scientist. He wasn't just a science fiction writer, although he kind of garnered his reputation through some of his great science fiction books. But he wrote on a lot of other things. And I'll never forget, I don't know exactly where I read it, but I was able to find it. I was able to find it because he wrote this little mind thought experiment, which I think is very applicable to 2020 and all of our high-tech knowledge and all of our great power over, things digital. He said, he once wrote, this is Isaac Asimov, he once wrote, he imagines a player that makes its images plain to you, but doesn't intrude upon those around you. He's like, imagine a player of some type, some mechanical, some magical contraption that it makes images plain to you, but it doesn't intrude on those around you. He imagines a future in which on-off switches are not needed, and the player can be controlled by will. The player would stop when you take your eyes off of it, and start up again when you left where you left off, and when you look at it. He imagines a device that would allow you to play the cassette at your own pace, move forward or backward at will, skip or repeat sections. Finally, he writes, and this is Asimov writing, you'll have to admit that such a cassette would be a perfect futuristic dream. Self-contained, mobile, non-energy consuming, perfectly private, and largely under the control of the will. But dreams are cheap, so let's get practical. Can such a cassette possibly exist? To this, my answer is yes. Yes, of course. The next question is, how many years will we have to wait for such a deliriously perfect cassette? I have an answer for that, he says. And a quite definite one. We will have it in minus 5,000 years, because what I have been describing is a book. What I've been describing is a book. This miraculous device that you stop and start at will, that generates images, that you can go back, forward, it's food for thought. Want to end with talking about ebooks. It's like, it's not always about this. It's like now, it's like certainly the revenue coming from ebooks has essentially dwarfed that of regular book sales. As of 2013, they were a total of 1/4 of U.S. book sales. That has gone up. That has my journal here. Let me give you the exact. Let me give you the exact thing for 2020. If I can just find it real quick. If I can't find it real quick, then I'm not. So physical books still outsell ebooks, which is interesting. The bookseller estimates global ebook sales around 19% of total book sales by revenue, and a whopping 36% by unit sales. But it's a thing. It's certainly a thing. And we'll talk more about why that is happening. But I wanted to end with talking about e-publishing. A lot of you would be writers, and I know a lot of you already. A lot of my former students and some of you now are probably working on books and starting to realize that you don't have to go to Random House. You don't have to go to Sage. You don't have to go to all these publishers and go through this whole vetting process that, lo and behold, self-publishing is becoming this really, really lucrative source of income for a lot of people. It becomes a question of, how you market and, is it any good? It's like, first-time authors or writers of small niche books can now bypass traditional book publishers and find an outlet for their work. We talked about that with a couple of these people like Mr. Green with The Fault in Our Stars and the girl that was doing in one of the early chapters of Hanson, the girl that was doing comic strips and became fabulously successful. Ebooks can be published almost instantly, right? You don't have to wait, as opposed to the 1 to 2 years of traditional publishing. Ebook authors typically, and here's a big one, in our pandemic-ridden age, ebook authors typically get royalties of 40 to 70%, compared to 5 to 10% offered by traditional publishers. That's money you keep. That's money in hand, all right? And that's about what I've got for today. Yeah. So, remember, quiz on Tuesday, study up on that, no excuses, you've got the links, you've got the emails, media scans, and we got another mini assignment coming up that I'll talk to you about concerning newspapers on Tuesday. Have a nice weekend, and we'll see you on Tuesday. Thanks.